Hey everybody, and welcome to today's. Did you hear it? I put on my podcasting voice.
You've got it. It sounds great.
Welcome to our Design Leadership Q&A with our good friend Aarron Walter, who is the VP of Design Education and Envision and the author of Designing for Emotion. We're going to talk about that a little bit. He's also a major supporter of the Bureau. Aarron helped us establish our design leadership community and helped us with Design Leadership Camp and continues to help us in so many ways. So thank you for that, sir.
Oh, my pleasure.
And
Super
before we
fun.
get started, I want to thank our good friends at Envision. Not only are they a great supporter of the Bureau, but they've also paid for today. So if you bought a ticket today, you'll be getting a refund. Envision wanted to go ahead and pick up the cost for everybody, so that's wonderful. Also, MailChimp, it feels like I'm going down your resume here.
You just like reading my resume here.
MailChimp, thank you so much for everything you do for us. And Platform SH, if you are building and working in an agile format, take a look at Platform SH for your host. And with that, let's get started. Aarron, I want to start off talking about what's coming up really soon, which is the second edition of your book. And I want to understand, you told me that 2011, 9 years ago, the first edition came out. And then you thought second edition was just going to be this easy thing. It ended up being a lot of work. What were the real changes between Designing for Emotion in 2011 and in this ridiculous 2020?
Yeah, it is a ridiculous 2020. Maybe a little additional context. If you're not familiar with Designing for Emotion, it's a book that I wrote when I was leading the design team at MailChimp, and we were experimenting with a lot of different types of the intersection of design and psychology. So industrial designers, architects, designers of many different backgrounds have always recognized that psychology plays a big role in shaping human behavior, and design plays a big role in shaping that psychology and behavior as well. And so the book is the first edition was really about those foundational principles of how to bring those ideas into digital design. Software products at the time, like the pinnacle of our industry was, let's make a really usable product. But, you know, for us, creating a usable product is a bit like a chef saying, I'm going to create edible food. That's a pretty low bar. Like, I think we could make better experiences, right? And so back in 2010, when I was writing the book, in 2011, when it came out, I had honestly a pretty rosy view of the web and the possibilities of how it was maturing, and social networks were blooming and kind of becoming a central part of our world. iPhone was still relatively new, persistent connections. Felt like it was an exciting time. And today, in the past year, as I've been working on this new edition, I feel very differently. And I think we all feel very differently about the world that we're in, that it's a lot more complicated. So this book is, if the first edition, the theme was Design for Delight, which was that mantra that guided us for so long.
Yeah.
This is, let's design beyond delight, because we're not always, feeling that delightful. We're feeling fearful. We're feeling left out, lack of inclusion, mistrust. And so we need to design for all the emotions that people bring to our products. That's what this new edition is all about.
Well, and I think it was one of the earlier chapters, I think it was around chapter 4, where you get into empathy and inclusion. And you shout out to our good friends at Project Inkblot. I know you put in some of their design for diversity.
Big spotlight on them.
Was there anything like that in the first edition, or is this a brand new chapter?
No, it's a brand new chapter. So what Carl's referring to is there's a new chapter on designing for diversity and inclusion. And two really amazing designers, design thinkers in this space, Jahan Manton and Boywen Gao, who have this amazing framework, Designing for Diversity, that's referenced in there, the work at Microsoft that they've done for Designing for Inclusion. There are a lot of great ones out there. I think that what Boywen and Jahan have created is the best, talking about our good intentions as designers and the actual outcomes of our work. And there's often a gap, and how do we bridge that gap? And today, more than ever, we need to be thinking about that. I think we're all very aware of the inequity in our world. And
Yeah.
as designers, there's a lot that we can do.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think one of the great things about their platform, and Jahan and Boywin will say this, is that they've neglected to use it a few times and they left people out.
Mm,
So that was when they
yeah,
realized they really had something, was
yeah,
when they thought, oh, well, we know this. I mean,
yeah,
we're DEI specialists, and then they get in there and they find they're doing it. Well, we do
yeah.
have a lot of questions. So once again, for those of you who just logged in, please use the Q&A feature. And Aarron, I say we dive into it because
Let's
with the
do it.
time we have and the questions we have, we'll probably just get through them. So the first one that came in was, what are the characteristics that make for a great design leader? So you've met a ton of design leaders, probably
Yeah.
some that weren't that great. You wouldn't talk about that, but some great ones. What do you see as those real characteristics?
I think the foundational characteristic is service, like a service mindset that
Mhm.
direct reports everyone on your team that you are a servant to their needs. You're guiding them in their career path. You're providing them mentorship and perspective in difficult situations. You're also pushing them and giving them sometimes tough feedback or coaching that help them see that they're capable of more. Um, and you're also advocating for them, kind of managing up. Safe harbor is another phrase I hear a lot of people use for your team, because sometimes you get incoming requests from different places or directives from people who maybe are kind of out of the chain of command.
Yeah.
So protecting your team in that respect. I think also, you know, leaders that I find really inspirational who are great. Um, they they're super fast at getting back to clear roadblocks for people,
Huh.
instead of letting those things sit, because that slows people down and that makes work frustrating.
Right.
Um, and I think there's also just like this vigilance that really great leaders have to have, that you're always paying attention to um, the needs of others, what the team has to be doing, and thinking a few steps ahead of everybody else, coming more prepared than everybody else.
So I think that answer leads really well into this next question, because I think part of it is the way the industry is, part of it is the acceptance of design. Um, it feels like most design leaders are changing jobs every 2 years or more frequently. Why
Yeah.
do you think that is? And I think about their teams, and we've even had some conversations in the bureau community, the design leadership community, around how do you leave your team okay when you're getting ready to go somewhere. The
Yeah.
fact that that's a conversation like shows that people are changing jobs pretty frequently.
They are. And I think it's for a few reasons. I think that, major software companies are hyper competitive. There's a lot of poaching that's happening.
Yeah.
Um, there's concentration of a lot of human beings in cities where there are multiple opportunities. I'd say at this moment in time, those opportunities are considerably smaller. I also think that we need to acknowledge that we're in a really high burn industry, really high burn. Like
Yeah.
I've had this conversation with so many design leaders that they're always on. Um, there's a lot that's expected of us, probably more than one human can actually deliver on. There's a lot of like reorging and changing, and that's emotionally and ultimately physically expensive.
Right.
And I think that, jumping to a new thing, a key piece of that is like, if I don't have the career opportunity in front of me at this location, at this company, I'm going to go find it elsewhere. Um, but I think people are also looking for greener pastures of,
Yeah.
I'm drowning over here. I'm super tired. I'm not able to do the meaningful work that I'd really like to be able to do because of factor XYZ.
Yeah.
And there are opportunities out there to move forward. But, I think for us, like, I've heard people say, I can't wait. I can't wait for the next opportunity to be created for me. I have to go make the opportunity for myself.
Wow.
And so that's why there's a lot of movement.
Yeah. I would definitely agree with that, especially the whole, I mean, poaching, but also that opportunity to start fresh with everything that you've learned, that sense of a new beginning. I think that also, especially when you're in burnout and you see something, the greener pastures, like you said, I think that definitely comes into play.
I think
This,
there's one other thing I want to add to that, Carl, which is I would encourage people to also reflect that if you're switching jobs every 2 years, like you're kind of just getting your bearings at that point.
yeah,
You know who to talk to and the channels and so forth. Can you ever really build anything significant? I mean, you can kind of step forward in a career, maybe to
yeah.
title, salary, etc. But are you able to build anything significant? You kind of have to hang out for at least 4 years to be able to do something real.
I was going to say 4 years. I mean, that's not to say that that's the term of a president. We don't need to get into that. But it seems like if 4 years is the time that you give someone to try to change a country, that feels like a time frame you should be able to change a company.
Yeah,
But 2 years is just so fast. Now,
yeah.
the next question that came in, I think, is really interesting because I've seen this struggle with people. I'm a creative director overseeing the design quality and process for a team of 5 designers. Does that make me a design leader? I'm not really sure how that role is defined.
Yeah, I wouldn't get too hung up on it. I think the part that feels uncomfortable to people is, am I still making things? Am I still connected to my craft?
Right.
Or have I made that transition where my work is more abstract? I'm clearing obstructions for people. I'm creating career ladders. I'm, attending meetings, whatever those things are that are the abstraction that enables a team to make good work. Um, and I think that we've probably all come to this point in our career where we've had to reflect, like, what do I need to be happy? Do you need to make things, even in a small capacity? And that doesn't even have to be at work. It could be a thing that you make at home. So I've talked to design leaders who knit, who garden, who paint, who do different things to be able to scratch that itch of making a thing,
Right.
so they can go to work and be that leader that their team needs them to be. And that can be okay. Or, I actually found this towards the tail end of my tenure at MailChimp, that I needed to be a little more hands-on and closer to the metal to like actually have some role in producing products, because I was used to doing that, like having such influence on that. And then I got so far away from that, which was good because I learned different skills.
Right.
Um, so, are you a design leader or not? Um, are you providing guidance for your team? Are you providing coaching? Are you providing safe harbor for your team? Then yes, and be cognizant of how much you have to stay connected to the physicality of your craft to be happy.
No, I think that that's critical. And we hear those conversations in the camps all the time, the maker versus manager,
Yeah,
and removing that creation portion of yourself is part of that burnout, right? That can totally lead to it when you feel like, what am I doing?
yeah,
I
it's
no
not.
longer have this feeling of creating something.
Yeah, you're not getting your battery filled up. We
Yeah.
really have to know what fills our batteries. That's really important.
Yeah, without a doubt. Um, a sort of related question here. Tim Busing, I hope I said your name right, Tim. If you're leading an internal design team, under what circumstances and for what need would you consider hiring an external team or consultancy? Or is this only happening when the rest of the business doesn't trust your internal abilities or capacity to deliver on their needs? And I love that twist in the question
Mm.
because I can see that if you're really working hard and then another team is going to come in, you could take that different ways, especially if you're not part of the decision.
Yeah, I would definitely, if somebody else hired them and brought them in, um, I would be asking myself questions like, um, how is my team not delivering on its promises? What's expected of my team? How visible is my team and their work? How does my team create value for the business? How is that measured and communicated to the business? Because if you don't have answers to those, then chances are your team is a bit of a black box. Either a black box that you're not a known quantity and not understood, or there's some sort of failing in partnerships that needs to be addressed with your team, and that could be your role, but also the rest of your team and how they interact with the rest of the organization. I do think that there are logical times to bring in outside help if you have gaps with specific specialties,
Right.
like brand consultancies sometimes come in. Process consultants will come in and help you operationalize and become more efficient as the company grows and refines its process. And that's all good because it can be a temporary engagement that can help you get additional capacity or level up your skills. And that's non-threatening.
Yeah.
Ultimately, you'd hope to be involved in that decision process as well. And sometimes you just need more hands. You just need more people to help out and spin that up on a contract basis instead of like hiring 50 people, which is expensive. The onboarding is very difficult, can be not sustaining because it's just a significant overhead.
Right.
So external consultancies can be great, and they can come in and work directly side by side with you. That's not uncommon. That's pretty typical. And then when you're done with that engagement, they can move on, and you don't have that overhead.
Yeah. Any tips for how you onboard that external team, like how you get them up to speed and feeling a little bit more like part of the core?
Well, I think that design operations, when a team starts to get sufficiently large,
Hmm.
having design operations like a chief of staff who can help you centralize assets, centralize documents, anything that communicates vision, brand, like these big picture things that they need to be able to execute on a specific project. They need to, make sure that the writing and the design style and, all of those different things that are part of your culture that are embodied in these physical design things, they need to understand those and be able to bring those in. If I were to hire someone to come in and work on a project, I would spend a lot of one-on-one time with them to talk about that brand spirit ahead of time to make sure that we're a good fit, that they get us. At MailChimp, we used Fuzzco a lot as a partner that kind of expanded our capacity for marketing.
Cool.
And that was a great partnership because their sense of humor and voice, like it was not a stretch for them to figure us out.
Yeah.
So it's a little like dating, of like understanding one another and your value system and see if that value system aligns. And that needs to happen up front. And then your design operations internally needs to have really great onboarding, which is not just for agency partners, but it's also for hiring new designers going forward so they can get up to speed very quickly.
Yeah, I think that dating analogy is really spot on, especially because there are those times where you engage with an external team and you find that your energy came back, right?
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
like suddenly they're an injection of great energy and
Right,
oh, that's right, we were enjoying this. So
right.
it's like that's
That's what we're about. I
exactly.
forgot.
All right, let's take a look. We got some questions coming in.
Yeah.
Raina has a question. How do you balance mentoring and crafting career paths for your designers without neglecting your own professional growth? What is a good point of focus?
Um, this is a great question, Raina. I think that, and I think it's a really important one that developing a career ladder um, as soon as you can, thinking about that, even if it's not super polished and clear, it helps even as you're hiring new people, but also in retaining your existing talent. Because you talk to any designer and why they join a team and why they stay at a team often has some connection to opportunity to grow. And if they feel like they're always doing the same type of work, that they're a little pigeonholed,
Mhm.
if they don't see clear opportunity, so maybe some of them they aspire to be a manager, and some of them think that they want to be a manager only because it's a better title and better pay, not
Right.
because they actually want to do the work.
Exactly.
And maybe what they need to do is just be a principal designer, like level up in that craft, um, and get paid more and have more juice in the company because of that title, but still be connected to craft. So one thing you can do with younger folks or people who are earlier in their career, if
Mhm.
they think they want to manage, I've heard this from Twitter and lots of other companies. They do this too. You give them one person to manage on one project. So instead of like shifting their title and salary and so forth, it's just like, you're interested in management. Let's prototype this. Let's test this out, and see how that goes. And then be involved very closely, checking in with both the person who's being mentored and managed, as well as the manager. So you
Yeah.
get both sides to see how that's going, to see if that's a good fit and expand that conversation. And then in terms of like your career path, I highly recommend building in reflection time. And this is something, so I co-host a podcast, the Design Better podcast, with my colleague Eli Woolery, who's also been involved with design
Oh yeah.
leadership camps.
Eli's awesome.
He's great. And we just had Bill Burnett on. He wrote Designing Your Life, and I recommend this book. And he also has a new book called Designing Your Work Life, which is worth reflecting on, reading so you can reflect on your career path and what you want. There are a lot of great exercises in both of these books that that Bill co-authored. One of the things he says is building in time for reflection. So much of our life is like, when you're at work, it's action packed with meetings and projects and things to do. You're always taking action. And
Mhm.
you get home, and then it's a lot of family activity or things that you have to do. And there's rarely that time that we make for ourselves to reflect, like, what's this all about? When am I most happiest? What are the traits of those times when I'm really happy?
Yeah.
Um, so you can identify your needs. Like, these are the things that I need. So when you're planning your career path, sometimes it's about, I need more money. Sometimes it's that I need more influence. Sometimes it's that I need more meaningful work. And so knowing that that's kind of like a dashboard, as Bill Burnett describes it, you can kind of dial these things up, and
Right.
thinking about, I'm shy on this money thing right now, and I'm in a season of my life where I need to like put my kid through college. So that can help you make your career decisions. Or, you've been at this for a long time and you feel like, I need more meaningful work, and you can dial that up. So think about those knobs of what it is you need. And then I've been impressed from conversations at Design Leadership Camp, where I've heard leaders go to their boss, who they report into, and say, I have clarity on the career that I want to create and where I'm going to go. And I'd love for that to happen here. Could we partner and work together? I'd love to work with you to shape that career, so I can have that career here. And that's such a great way to frame it, to say, like, we're in partnership,
Yeah.
and I know what I need. And it also signals, like, without being arrogant or kind of setting an air about your request, that I know my value, I know what I'm worth, and I want to make sure that you know that as well.
Yeah. That was an amazing conversation. I still remember that conversation, and the idea that the job that you have isn't necessarily the only one you can have there,
Yeah.
especially as we're saying, right? Like, people leave so quickly. You do see a lot of that high end turnover. And I want to go back to one point you made, which was the idea of a trial of leadership, like a
Hmm.
trial of doing that. Because the one thing that is the most difficult is when you get that promotion and everything changes,
Yeah.
and then you decide you don't want it,
Like,
because you feel like any moving back to where you were is going to feel like a failure, or you
yep.
didn't do what was asked of you. And so then you leave. Whereas I love that idea of, let's just try it and see.
Right.
That seems really smart.
Yeah.
So this gets us to another question. Um, Retention is so tough for us. Any suggestions? So, and this was from a design leader about their team, like how they
Mm.
keep their team longer.
Yeah. Um, attend to their growth needs. As I mentioned earlier, growth is like the number one factor that for most designers is this a place where I can grow? Do I see opportunity here? Um, having challenging work, engaging work is important. Helping them see that and frame that for them. Um, having a career ladder of like, here's where I can go.
Hmm.
Here are my. I have clarity of expectations of if I'm able to achieve these things, these milestones, I can move forward. I think there's stuff like if you're in the Bay Area, there's just a ton of competition and
Yeah,
the private chefs and gyms and barbers, and we'll pick up your dry cleaning and groom your dog. And, people are going to jump back and forth in that environment. It's going to happen. And I kind of say, like, in that case, maybe good riddance. If you're just in it for that, you're not here because of the ethos of what we're trying to accomplish together.
right.
Which makes me think if you're losing a lot of people because of those types of perks, competition on perks and kind of the side things, like might be salary too. Generally, my philosophy with salary is just make money, just take that off the table, pay them enough that they are well compensated and they feel valued, and then move on to the work and the partnership that you can have together. Um, and make sure that in your hiring process, you're screening very carefully. You're looking at like how frequently do they churn? Do they jump from place
Yeah,
to place? Are they mercenaries that are kind of like coming in for an option package and then they're going to the next place for another option package? They might not be the right fit. Um, you know, um, spending extra time in the interview process, not just a 1 hour interview. I've always enjoyed spending a whole day with someone to see,
yeah,
is this a good fit? Because people can fake their way through a 60-minute interview, but an 8 hour day, maybe even 2 days, like if you had to fly them in or something, it's very hard to do. You can really get to know each other and find out, like, is this going to work out for us?
yeah. I think that's great advice, and I also love the idea of understanding somebody's bad job, because I
Yeah.
think there's so much capacity right now and so many people getting hired so fast they haven't necessarily had a bad job. Like a lot of the people who are 3 or 4 years into their career may make that jump for the benefits, not
Yeah.
realizing that the reason somebody's going to groom their dog is because they're never going to leave work.
Right. Yeah. You're
We're going to
trapped.
pick up your dry cleaning because you won't be able to.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think there's something else there worth mentioning. If you're having trouble with retention, consider being totally remote, because that opens up the talent pool to the entire world.
Yeah,
Um, you know, there are definitely some time zone issues. So, like, how many time zones apart can we be and still be productive?
yeah,
Um, it's hard when you're on one side of the globe and somebody else is on the opposite side. It's midnight there, and you're getting started with your day, 9 a.m. or something.
that's right.
But let's say half the world, that's a lot of people versus who's local and
Yeah.
who's going to get poached by somebody else. That makes it a lot easier to retain people.
Yeah, I think that's again really good input. And I think one of my favorite things was we ended up in some crazy time zone issues where I asked somebody if they could have something for me on Friday, and they went, "It is Friday," and I went, "Oh God!" Right? It's
So
like
can you have it to me today?
we're to Australia, like we totally were there. All right, let's get back to our questions.
Yeah.
And again, if you've got questions, throw them in the Q&A for us. From Dean over in Ford Kitchens. I'm looking to grow our design business. I'm a newly minted design manager. Currently, it's a small part of everything that we do, full service digital agency. What are the top 3 things that I or we should do? Now, I'm going to let you say one if you don't have three. It's like, I love Dean, but that feels kind of heavy.
So I just want to make sure I'm clear about what you're asking, Dean. You want to grow the business. What are the top 3 things that you should be doing to grow the business or should be doing to support your team?
I think to grow the design side of the business. So that is interesting because that is kind of 2 questions. One is the growing the design capacity with designers, and the other is coming in here. So he's basically saying, yeah, grow the design side of the business. Thanks, Dean.
Um, well, it depends on what your barriers to that growth are. Is the barrier the conversations you're having with potential clients? Is
Hmm.
the barrier whoever's leading the business investing in more design, like giving you more headcount so you could, have expanded capacity? Um, I think in both situations, I probably would start by really thinking about um, the value that design creates. And our pal Ryan Rumsey is here with us, and I know that he probably would say the same thing. And has written a really great book called Business Thinking for Designers, which you can find at designbetter.com and download for free. Um, and he's got a lot of great frameworks in there that will help you consider how might we measure the value of design, the impact of design, frame it in strategic contexts. Once people can start to see that design is not a nice to have, it's essential to a successful business, whether that's the agency, the service business, or it's the business receiving the services, the client. Um, Design is a way to create durable competitive advantage
Yeah.
in so many different markets and industries. And being able to articulate that and show that is really essential to expanding your design business.
Yeah. And I would add to what you're saying there that every lead is a design lead,
Yeah.
right? Everything that's coming in, there's the potential for design to make it better. And with the report that Leah Bewley did all around the
Yeah.
design maturity, there's so much just meat in there for full service shops as well as for in-house teams to
Mm-hmm.
understand whatever it is you're working on, design can get you there faster, design can get you there more effectively.
Yep.
So Dean, I'll drop that in the Slack channels for you, so you could take a look at that report. It's really pretty fascinating. All right, let's see here. This this one did make me laugh. Uh, how do you help struggling designers on your team without shutting them down? I know everyone isn't a special snowflake, but some of our most talented people are.
Um, I'd love to. Is the person who asked this on the call? Maybe they could.
They sent it anonymously,
Okay.
so
So supporting them in their.
I do know them a little bit for context, though. So
Okay.
I'll provide without oversharing.
Okay. Um, well, I think that it is essential for all designers. We do like to think that we're special and we're creative and we're bottling lightning, but we are providing a piece of value for the business. So
Yeah,
we need to think about ourselves in a different capacity. We're not making art; we're making something that serves a purpose. Um, so helping people see that is important. I think that part of seeing that is learning to talk about your work on a regular basis and building that into your process. If it's a younger, like a junior designer, creating that safe space for them to talk about their work in design reviews and crits inside the design team is a good start. When they start to talk about their work as that brilliant snowflake, I captured lightning in a bottle.
mm-hmm.
Challenge them with questions about how their solution relates to user needs and business needs. They need to be able to speak about their work in that context. And if they can't, then they're making a thing for themselves, in which case,
Yeah,
go rent yourself a studio and make some art. Because really, we're making things for other people, to serve a business, and to serve the people who are patronizing that business. So I think that's an essential skill. I think also if it's a junior designer who's maybe coming out of design school and still trying to get their bearings with the operating within the business world, pairing people in your team, someone who's more senior and more junior, so they can get more regular feedback, coaching, mentorship, is very valuable, because it's taxing, especially if you start to have a pretty large team, to be that mentor for everyone.
yeah,
Um, it's still incumbent upon you as the leader of the team to offer that mentorship on a regular basis. But if that person's really green and they need more support, more personal investment, then having a buddy system is really helpful too.
Yeah, I'll add to that when I was more in that role, everybody was doing, there was always content first, mobile first, this first, that first. We used to
Mm-hmm.
always say rationale first. It's
Mm,
like before we start talking about anything, just explain why it's valuable.
yeah.
And I think that just when someone has to pitch their idea, for lack of a better phrase, when they have to share why
Mm-hmm.
this is valuable, I think that, especially every time, I think it starts to get their head in the game, right? It starts to get them thinking differently. So, and I will say that I think they may have somebody who should be a professional artist on their team, and I think they would be great at it. So they should probably let them go.
And you know what? Sometimes when you have a highly talented person who just does not play well with others,
Yeah.
you got to cut that person, because they will change the tenor of your team so dramatically. And the moment they leave the building, you will feel the tension dissipate, and you'll feel the collaboration in your team. People, it's like a weed choking out the flowers.
Yeah.
You've got to get rid of that for everybody else to realize their potential.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. You can feel the air come back into the room. You can feel everybody suddenly is like, I'm going to do better work now.
Yeah.
So that was great. All right, let's see. We've got a question coming in from Teresa. How do you manage growth and development with the designer that doesn't know where they want to go with their career? They're very comfortable with where they are and have been for some time.
Yeah. So someone that's kind of hanging tight.
Yeah.
Um,
Or is that okay?
I think it is okay. There are some people, I have known some people who just like, they're just kind of, it's like a bit of fixed mindset. But they're good at what they do. And so they can just keep plugging along. Some people are not super ambitious. I think that's okay. But I mean, ideally, what we want in our best employees are people who, they want to grow, they want to expand their capabilities. I would, with a person like that, I would set small milestones and goals. They might feel overwhelmed by a lot of change, or like a goal that's so audacious. Within a year's time, I'd like you to do some public speaking. Within a year's time, I'd like you to present at an all hands meeting, or whatever that thing is. That can feel so frightening that it pulls them back into the comfort of, but I do this. This is the thing that I do, and I know how to do. But if it's a small incremental thing where, like, here's a learning path, I think that you have more in you in this capacity, and let's develop this skill. And so let's do specific learning things, conferences or reading, or whatever that might be. Just even writing blog posts, setting small incremental milestones for them to expand their skills is great. Another thing you could do is pair them with someone who's not in their discipline. So pair them with an engineer, pair them with someone in marketing, where that kind of forces them to expand their perception of what they do and think about that from someone else's skill set. But those small movements, also, not to harp on career ladders, but if you have a career ladder, and that is tied to salary levels, a career ladder is going to show, like, to go up to level 3, you need to satisfy these, you need to be able to do these things.
Mm-hmm.
So let's work towards that, so you can get that promotion, that raise, whatever it is. That gives them something concrete to work towards. And for someone who's got more of a fixed mindset, but is has good work ethic and is reliable, sometimes that's helpful, because it's not abstract. It's very concrete. Like, I take this step. I find that anytime I've got someone who's just a linear thinker, of like, they're good at what they do, they're hardworking, They're great people, but they require that specific direction to move forward. Sooner or later, it doesn't work out.
Mm.
So that's one thing I would also encourage you to think about, is that mediocrity will beget mediocrity. And there are times where we have to make hard decisions. There's a great episode of Akimbo, Seth Godin's podcast, where he talks about difficult conversations. And he says the reason why they're difficult is because we want two things to be true. We want, we want this person to stay, but we also want this person to grow. And one of those things is not happening. So I might have to make this other decision. So sometimes there are difficult challenges, difficult decisions with that.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'd never thought about just getting them to look up and look at something else. And just because they do that, now they're going to see more opportunity or things to address. And I am curious, I'd like to understand a little bit more on, if that doesn't happen, why do you think it is that eventually it doesn't work out if they stay in that one focus?
I think because ultimately, companies need flexibility. Companies are in a perpetual state of change. And when you have, if we think about a company as an organism and one of those cells is immutable, it just does not move or change, the whole organism is going to move forward without them.
Yeah.
And if they cannot change and adapt, they might do great work for a couple years, 4 years. And then ultimately there's a realization like, this isn't working out. I don't know how to go forward with this person.
Right. All right. Let's see. You are welcome, Teresa. I'm glad that helped out. Let's see here. This one I think is a great one as well. And I think it's something a lot of people struggle with, especially because so many designers are more introverted. Do you think of yourself as a leader? Why is there such a stigma around calling ourselves leaders? And again, that could be their culture, that could be something like that. But do you find that in different places, calling yourself a leader just has a stigma to it?
Not for me, but I'm, maybe.
We're in a design focused organization. It's like, yeah.
Yeah. I think that goes back to, I have been a designer and I've been involved in craft, and there's, Julie Zhu, used to be head of product design at Facebook, and she's left and wrote a great book. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. The Making of a Manager. She's very vulnerable about her shortcomings. And she talked about that awkward transition of being on a design team of like 5 or 6 in the early days of Facebook, and then becoming the head of that design team and feeling like, she said, I don't have the best Photoshop skills. I'm not like the best designer here. She didn't have a design degree. I think she studied computer science. So she felt like I don't belong as the head of this team. But she talked about having to retrain her mind that she's a force multiplier, that she's for her team, that she can enable them to do more and do better work and do more connected work across different teams and across the organization, get more visibility into their work and have higher impact. So if you're feeling a sense of like, do I have the right to be called a leader? Yes, you do have a right to be called a leader. If you're acting in that capacity, and you, even if you're not a great leader, even if you haven't figured it out, because none of us have, nobody's figured out all of this stuff. You're going in every day and you're giving it your best, and you're learning and growing. You deserve that title. And that's okay. I would also challenge people. A gentleman we've had at Design Leadership Camp multiple times, Jihad Afone from VMware, he said something that really resonated with me. And his career has gone in since, was it Hawaii Design Leadership Camp? Hawaii was 2018 or 19?
Yeah, 2018, Kaloa. Yep.
Okay. So 2018, he came to that design leadership camp running a design systems team of like 6 people, limited time, limited number of resources, limited budget to be able to launch that. The year later, he was like one level below the head of design for the entire company. And he said something that I think we should all keep in mind. He said, I don't think of myself as a design leader. I think of myself as a business leader.
Yep.
That is what it's all about, and about being successful with design, about having greater impact on the company. If you're only thinking about pixels and tabs and buttons and forms and so forth, you're looking at life through the microscope. And what you want to do is shift your purview to look through the telescope and see the entirety of the business, the entirety of your team, how your team plugs into the business, to other teams, and so forth. Have to think like a business leader, not a design leader.
Yeah, that's amazing advice. And Johane, just that idea of shifting from design to business, because now you're leading your team who's focused on design. Like you can show them how to get integrated. You can show them how to add value. So good. Let's see, we got another question from Raina. I'm considering positioning my creative team as an independent department outside of the marketing org. Do you have any resources you can recommend on how to go about doing this?
Okay, it depends on what your challenge is. And so I would recommend that you think about organizational, what's your goal? Like, what do you gain? And what's at risk in this transition? So if you are external outside of the marketing org, and you're what a lot of large organizations call a center of excellence, you're kind of like a service type of team that people come to for work. There can be some benefits to that of like you're centralizing. If your design culture is weak and you want to enhance that, that's a great model. If you have a goal of creating a design system that would expedite and speed up your process and make you more efficient, that's a good scenario for that as well. If you are struggling with team partnership things, that's probably only going to make it worse because you're externalized and you've got to spend a lot of time going back and forth with other teams to build relationships and partnerships. You'll also have more infrastructure of like intake process, project management, or design operations, safe harbor of what's coming in, managing like my team has X amount of capacity, the work that's coming in from different stakeholders who are like head honchos is our capacity plus 10. So you can't deliver to all of the stakeholders. So how do you then go back to someone and say like, we need to deprioritize because I'm getting all this incoming from different places? That's a challenge. So that's something to think about. If you don't have a great relationship with engineering, that's going to only divide you further. So resources for this, Eli and I wrote a book called the Design Leadership Handbook a little while back, and that might be worth checking out. It's free. It's on designbetter.com. So you could take a look at that. I'd also recommend, again, Ryan's book, Business Thinking for Designers, could be a valuable resource as well. I think it just goes back to like, what are the goals you're trying to achieve? Mm-hmm. I talked to John Maeda about this topic of organizational structure a couple years ago, and I naively asked him like, "What's the best organizational structure for a design team?" And he said, "Well, have you ever tried to build a shelf? It's kind of like building a shelf. What do you want to put on the shelf? Is that shelf going to hold nice little knickknacks and tchotchkes? Is it going to hold your entire library collection? Is it going to hold maybe a bunch of heavy canned goods and food? Is it going to be in your garage or is it going to be in your living room?" The goals for each one of those shelves is very different. And so the materials you would choose for that shelf are going to vary with your objectives, which is such a great way of saying like, there are lots of ways to organize, and thinking of organizational structures not as like, let's move to this and it will solve all our problems, because it won't.
No.
But know that you can change it again and again. You can be a centralized team like Raina's describing. You can be a decentralized team. You can have a hybrid model as you grow, as the business's needs shift. So think about the objectives now. And then in terms of like making that change, I mean, there's a lot of communication around that. You should do a road show. If there's an all hands, I think that's marketing all hands type of thing, presenting to that group so everyone is aware of the shift and your processes if those are different, all that stuff.
That's great. So we're coming up at the end of our time here. So if you do have any questions, go ahead and get them in. We've got a few more that we're sending ahead of time. This is a good one, Aarron. What are some of the processes to advocate for and elevate design priorities in a multidisciplinary product team? That's a good specific one for you there.
Say it again, the first part.
Yeah. What are some of the processes to advocate for and elevate design priorities in a multidisciplinary product team? So how do you get those design priorities up to the top?
Okay. I don't think I totally understand the question. Like, what are the characteristics of a successful multidisciplinary product team?
Yeah, I think they were saying, how do you make sure that design matters for a multidisciplinary product team? So if you've got people that are
Yeah.
much more worried about the functional aspects, or they're much more worried
Right.
about features, but they're not really thinking about the way that it feels.
Right. Right. Um,
Again, it kind of comes back to Leah Bewley's and that research. And I mean, there's so much there.
does to a certain degree. Yeah. I think that, it depends on the challenges that you're having. If people don't really understand what design is,
Right.
and they don't think qualitatively, they don't see the qualitative value of design. There are a couple things that I've had conversations with people about that has maybe started to spark some shift in perspective. For instance, if you download an app on your phone and you use it, and that experience to begin with is not a good experience, and by good, like that could be about functionality and reliability and usability, but it could also be like, does this feel good? I'll give you an example. Calm and Headspace. They're two apps in the same space. When I downloaded Headspace, the feel of the app felt like intuitive, was usable, but also I didn't feel intimidated around a subject of meditation and mindfulness that seems pretty intimidating to me. Calm felt like I was getting hit by a lot of marketing, and like there's a lot of stuff they're trying to bring at me.
Yeah.
And so subsequently, if that's not a great experience out of the gate, we delete things from our phone. And when we delete it, we don't go download it again. First impressions are really, really critical. So qualitative feedback makes a huge difference. So helping people see that is good. I think bringing people into design reviews is really important. Not just designers. If it's just designers and design reviews, you're probably not getting a broad perspective. Having a facilitator run that design review, having engineers, having subject matter experts like maybe lawyers, or could be someone from the support team. Sometimes having executives in those reviews and framing the conversation so they can see the work and see how it connects to business objectives. That's another way for people to start to understand design. Design reviews are kind of the center of a lot of things. So I probably would start there. And if you Google Ventures design review process, you'll find a great article by Braden Cowitz, who used to be at Google Ventures, show you how to run a design review.
Yeah. And I would add to that, having those other disciplines watch users use the product in the wild. Because a lot of times when people never get out enough to see somebody use something, they can't understand what it's right there. Why are they not because there aren't cues. There's no way for them to find it.
Yeah.
That's another thing to me was always just fascinating to watch
Yep.
somebody try to accomplish a task without being
Yep.
able to help them.
Nothing builds empathy like watching suffering.
Oh my God, you just summed up 2020. Um,
Yeah.
Speaking of which, we're coming up on our last question here, and it ties right into that. How is the ongoing challenge or challenges really of 2020? How are they impacting the role of the design leader? When we see the turmoil in our world,
Hmm.
the everything that's happening with Black Lives Matter, everything that's happening with the pandemic, how does that change what it is to be a design leader? It's a nice, easy, light question to end on.
Yeah. I mean, it's changing a lot. I think there's just a lot on all of us.
Yeah,
And to bring us full circle in our conversation, that first question was about the traits of a good design leader
yeah,
and being a servant leader. Um, more, more service. Thinking about the needs of your team, being sensitive to the fact that people are spent. People are emotionally spent. They feel really concerned about their families.
hmm,
They feel concerned about safety in their community. They feel spiritually exhausted that I don't know what's going on in the world and I don't know what I can count on. There's so much uncertainty, and being able to check in with people, any one-on-one, any meeting, making the space. How are you doing? How are you feeling?
yeah,
And not leaving it at that, like probing a little bit further, checking in with people, and being generous with additional time to recharge,
yeah,
I think is important. I try to make time in group meetings. Um, I'll spend 10 to 15 minutes, even 25% of the meeting. Just like, tell me about your weekend. Tell me about your family. Tell me about you and what you're feeling so I can get a read on where they are.
yeah,
Um, I think that's really important, especially if you are going through a transition to remote. And this is new for your team, and they feel like I'm not really set up for this at home, and I've got all these crazy kids running around, or things that might distract me. That's another factor to consider and be supportive of. And also, if you're making that transition, realize that you actually can get a ton done in like 4 hours. It might not require 8 hours of online time to be productive. If people are disturbed, they can really crank through a lot of stuff. I talked to the former COO of a major SaaS company that we've probably all used, and she had switched from like a 50 to 60 hour a week job to joining this company that was totally remote. She's like, it's freaking me out because I'm getting everything done in like 25 hours a week, and I don't know what to do about that.
That's so awesome.
Yeah.
It is true though, right? It's that is one thing that's come out of the pandemic is the new acceptance of remote work and the ability to focus. I hear from so many teams that they're getting things done faster, you know. So that's
Yeah.
well, Aaron,
Yeah.
thank you so much for being with us today. I truly
Thanks for
appreciate it.
having
Thank you
me.
for sharing your insights. Thanks to everybody who joined us today. Thanks again to Envision, not only for making this a free event for everyone, but also for all the great work and the content that you and Eli put out. I promote it all the time. Like everything
We
that you got
appreciate
going
it.
on with the podcast, the articles, the interviews. Also, thanks to MailChimp and to Platform SH for supporting us here. To everybody else, also want to let you know that on Thursday at 2 o'clock, we've got Claire Liu from Know Your Team, who is going to be joining us on the podcast. And she has an amazing insight into what CEOs and owners are going through right now with their team. So we're going to talk about leading with meaning with Claire. And with that, I will let you get on with your Tuesday, and we will talk to you soon. Thanks again, Aaron.
Thanks, Carl. Thanks, everybody, for joining. Have a good day.
Bye, Ryan.